Great. All right. Welcome, Mike. I'm so excited to meet you and chat with you today. Yeah. So if you can share where you are in the world so that folks know where you're calling in from.
So I'm in Superior, Arizona, which is a small town of about 4,000 people, located in the heart of the Tonto National Forest, which is in the Sonoran Desert region. So we're a pretty unique landscape as far as geography, topography, plants and animals. You know, we have prickly pear cactus. If anybody has heard of the Sonoran Desert Toad, which is the 5-MeO DMT, that's right out in my backyard. So yeah, pretty magical place to live, I think.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I was like, Sonoran,
Yeah,
huh? Awesome. I'm like I said, I'm really excited to connect with you, and I'm so glad that Stuart shared your contact information. If you could share a little bit about your history, what brought you to psychedelics, and a little bit of what you've discovered and utilized them for, that would be wonderful.
yeah. So kind of what led me to psychedelics was I spent 4 years in the Army. I'm a combat veteran. I did 2 years as artillery, 2 years infantry, which means I was combat arms. When I came home, I had a lot of issues for different reasons, adjusting to the civilian life, adjusting to the civilian lifestyle. Um, so I started going to the VA for some help, and because of the volume and amount of veterans that need help, you know, the best they can do is basically give you pharmaceuticals to try and sort of tend to the symptoms of the underlying problem, never really having the time or capacity or personnel to really delve that deep. I was introduced to some therapies that did help, but as far as something that had like a life-changing, life-shifting experience, fortunately, they did not. They gave me some coping tools and mechanisms, but it wasn't until a buddy of mine who was a childhood friend introduced me to psilocybin mushrooms that I had an experience that significantly healed um, not only things I experienced while I was in the service, but you know, a lot of experiences and traumas. You know, we all kind of come to when we're going through life, losses, difficulties, death, all those kinds of things. And once I experienced that, that really opened my mind up, because before that I was not very, I would say, open to the idea of using, you know, plants and fungi as medicine. It was just, you know, they were food, or it was illegal, and that's kind of, you know, how my brain categorized those two things. But now I have that I had that experience with the psilocybin mushrooms. I started doing my own research, looking at because there is actually a significant amount of science surrounding specifically psilocybin mushrooms, and how it benefits people with PTSD and depression, and even people looking at the end of life, and saw how that benefited me, and then that led me into as well microdosing, which I would say had its own. That there's, you know, the macro, which is, you know, a lot of it, and then the micro, which is, you know, a very small amount. And I think they both definitely have their place as far as helping people to heal and helping people to have the ability to go through their everyday lives where depression, anxiety, worry, you know, aren't the prevalent feelings in their hearts and on their minds. We're able to interact and be present with others, and I guess you can say kind of act authentically, you know, being your true self, because you're all the way there. And that was something I struggled with for a very long time, and microdosing really helped me to not only to be more present, but to be more aware of my actions, and how my actions influenced it and affected others, so much so that I saw a lot of the problems in my life, even though I could point at other things and other situations and other people and say, well, that's why I'm feeling this way. I came to the realization, well, no, it's how I'm taking that and putting it in here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you join the Army at 18 like most folks, or was that the...
Oh yeah. Well, I had known since I was probably 3 or 4 years old that I wanted to be a soldier. I was that little boy that had as many GI Joes as I could, and even the toys that weren't GI Joes, they got drafted. Let me tell you, they did their time. They did their service too. Barbie and Ken and Cody.
Nice.
Yeah. So 17 years old, before after I took the ASVAB, I immediately signed up, and so that way when I graduated, I was on the first thing smoking out of town.
Gotcha. And may I ask what your age is now?
I am 38 now.
30. Gotcha. So you've had a journey to get to this place of healing and discovery. How old were you when you discovered? You said you had done your 4 years, and
so I had been home. So I got out I went in 2001, right after I graduated, got out in 2005. And it wasn't around probably about 2009, 2010 before I had my first psilocybin experience. And even then, it was still kind of, I feel like the brain, unless you have somebody that really helps facilitate the process to help you to, and I've heard different words used, whether you want to call it internalizing or integrating those, I guess, lessons or experiences into, it takes a long time to chew on that and get it down if you don't have someone else kind of helping you do that. And even though, my buddy, he was great as far as holding space and kind of helping me through the experience. We didn't, kind of sit there and talk about it afterwards or what it meant or how it made me feel. Or, it was just, here's this great thing. And I'm forever indebted to him for introducing me to that and, holding the space and giving me that experience. But I feel like if the work is done differently, people can get a lot more benefit a lot faster. Whereas me, it took me, months to consume it, to get it down and to feel comfortable at stepping back into that space where it wasn't like, oh, well, I still got a lot of these unresolved things I haven't cleared out from the last time.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I was part of the Psychedelic Society in San Francisco. We got it kind of moving and grooving again about 3 or 4 years ago. And that was 90% of the work, was that people were coming there because they didn't have a community to be able to discuss what they experienced. And we had informal versions of that. And then we also had integration groups. And it's something that is emerging. I mean, it's been emerging for many, many years, but it's something that it feels like it's happening in tandem, but separate from what the involvement of the pharmaceutical industry bringing psilocybin to people, ketamine, psilocybin, all of these. They are putting in the context of a therapeutic session, but therapy and integration is a little different because it's not like, well, tell me about what happened in your childhood that caused blah, 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 or tell me of the experience that caused the PTSD. It's more like, I had this vision in this space of just letting go of fill in the blank, and it's changed me because I held that thing, and that's such a different experience in a lot of ways than therapy traditionally. And so it's a new skill set that's emerging, and you're very right that they say in many different medicine groups, 10% is the medicine, 90% is the integration and the process afterward, and how you now take that information into your life. And what's next? Gosh, my brain just got blown. Like, what context do I have for this? Yeah.
Or where do I put the pieces back in once it's blown out, or how do I handle that?
Do I need those anymore? I don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And that when I was going to college, one of my professors, she studied something called orality, and orality is basically your mind's need for you to say things out loud, for you to really conceptualize whether you believe it or not. And that might sound strange because everybody kind of knows what they think, but sometimes when you're saying things halfway through what you're saying, you're like, well, actually that's not exactly what I think, or that's not exactly how I feel. And by getting it out, you have the opportunity to really suss out, like, how do I feel? What do I think? And having that opportunity in space, and having that opportunity to express yourself, like, even just in general, I feel like is a very powerful thing. But add to that, like, like you said, adding the 10% medicine, it significantly, I feel like, improves that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting concept too, because especially in the psychedelic world, the biggest challenge for most people is putting words to their experience. Like, truly, like, it was like this. No, that's not right. Like, it was like, ah, it was like, ah. That's often a descriptive word.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you name the incident, and how do you bring that into a conversation and state truly without sort of massaging it, and that can be reflected by another person in a lot of ways. Like, well, was it like this? No, it wasn't quite like this. It was like, and that in and of itself, that therapeutic process can sometimes be in the traditional, like, MFT setting, but truly, it's, to be blunt, you have to have tripped to truly be able to relate to another person in that space and have those conversations, and have, years of experience with it. It seems that's when it starts to become juicier, like the first one is always, not always, not for everybody, but it oftentimes is life changing, but then you start to integrate, and then you bring some more medicine in, and it sounds like maybe you had a macro dose when you first did it, but it sounds like you're really interested in microdosing. Can you discuss, like, kind of how that trajectory happened for you?
Yeah. So initially, I was doing macro doses.
Do you
After
remember
kind of
how
getting
much?
into, when we started, it was 3.5 grams, 3.5 grams, which, to my understanding, is kind of like, the standard of a macro dose. 5 grams and above, I think, is what Terrence McKenna called the heroic dose. I got into that for a little bit, and that as well had its own benefits. But I still, even with those experiences, and even, integrating it and internalizing a lot of that medicine, I still was having issues, particularly, like, emotionally reacting in my day-to-day life, and finding it difficult to kind of hold myself together. And it wasn't always anger or rage, or, the things that you think of when you think of, like, PTSD, and most veterans, a lot of it was this deep, just emotional, things hit you differently. Like, people think, and even a lot of veterans think, oh, I'm going to go to war and come home cold and able to feel anything. And it's not that. It's that you feel things on a deeper level. Even the sadness and the compassion, and seeing, sad scenes, or hearing bad news, like, it just hits you so much deeper and affects you so much differently, that, I did find it hard to even just be present and interact, and feel, just the connection of looking another person, in their eyes, and being there with them. That was hard for me. So the microdosing, a friend of mine, a different friend, had mentioned to me before, and I was like, well, does it really work? It's a very, very small dose. It was, the capsules I took were 0.2 grams, which I was like, that's a fraction of what I had to find. Are you sure it's going to do anything for me? Yeah, it's, a couple of weeks, give it a try. And what I experienced was sort of a dual set of benefits in my life, where one benefit was kind of the rewiring of my brain, that I had more of the serotonin activity going on, where I could just generally feel better. But also, that was coupled with my ability to see in the moment of a situation that I could act differently. It didn't take me 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, like normally, where afterwards, when you're a bad human, you feel that later on. At some point, usually you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have acted like that. So instead of, down the road getting that, like, in the moment, you're like, is that who I want to be? Is that how I want to react? And, almost everyone's going to say, no, I don't want to be that person. I want to be the good person. So you can just shift some of those little actions, those little interactions with the people in your day that significantly changes your day. And I feel like those two things together help me quite a bit, and I've integrated it into my own life, sort of as a regular medicine, that when I feel myself, kind of slipping back into that autopilot mode, that it does help me to recenter and reconnect and be more present.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's incredible studies of, particularly with PTSD, of working with the mushrooms on a consistent basis as a method of starting to sort of almost defrag or kind of break up some of the old habituated ways of reacting and acting, because it allows for insight in such curious ways. They're such wonderful helpers. They just like, wait, have you thought about this? Let's try this right now. It's kind of like the little angel on your shoulder, like, hi, let's try this a different way, because it hasn't been working this other way. Let's do another version.
Like you gave the little angel bullhorn.
Yeah, that's what it is. Love that. Did you had mentioned that the VA or folks that had supported you in the beginning, when you were kind of recognizing you had PTSD and you worked with some pharmaceuticals. Do you mind talking about that and where you are now with those, if you have any still in your daily routine, or was there a transition? Or
Yeah. So the VA, like I said, because of the volume they do, that is unfortunately kind of their standard operating procedures. You come in, you have these symptoms, and here's the suite, literally a suite, not just one or two, medications they're going to throw at you. There's a suite, because, well, here's for this symptom and that symptom, but this one's to offset the side effects of this one, and then this one helps with it. And it's just like it quickly cascades into taking a multitude of these pharmaceuticals, which I would say are powerful in helping someone in a very bad sort of episode, in a very bad time. But I wouldn't say like these should be a diet. Like it shouldn't be every day forever. Like that's and my experience was, when I first started out, like it did help curb the sort of bottoming out that I had. I didn't go so deep. I didn't, feel so hopeless. I didn't feel in such a pit of despair. But at the same time, I wasn't able to, even more so, wasn't able to connect or be present or enjoy my life. And eventually I turned into just like the zombie. I was there, I was living my life. I was going to college. I had, jobs, but I wasn't there. So actually I was still taking, I had, after my macro dose experiences, I was kind of stepping down, taking fewer of the pharmaceuticals, but was still taking, can't remember what it was, an antidepressant at the time, and I was having a bad episode of night terrors, so they put me on a medic. Well, I was having problems going to sleep, so they gave me sleeping pills. Then I was having night terrors because of the sleeping pills. Well, then they gave me a medication that was supposed to keep me from getting into REM sleep, which was supposed to curb the night terrors. Well, actually, the first night that they gave me that medication and I took it, I ended up sleepwalking and ended up in my neighbor's backyard. Long story short, the cops got called. And yeah. So after that,
not helpful for long-term recovery. You got cops getting calls in the middle of your sleep cycle. Yeah, no, not good.
Yeah. So not a good situation. After that experience and the things because of it, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like just totally. So now I only take muscle relaxer because I have a bad back. When I have really bad episodes of pain and it locks up, that's kind of my relief. But other than that, as far as mood altering or psychiatric issues, like I just stick to the plant and fungi based medicines.
Awesome. And do you have a regimen now that you're sort of sticking to in terms of microdosing? And if you want to share any of the other plant medicines that you work with or experience, that'd be helpful too.
Yeah. So Arizona is a medical marijuana state. So after it first came out, I jumped on board pretty quickly. I think that was 2013, I want to say, and have been a big advocate and user. I do regularly take times off to kind of let my body kind of return as far as my what would you call it, tolerance, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah.
Because your body builds up a tolerance to anything over time.
Yeah.
So I do take times off from that. But the microdosing, I would say about every month, or not every month, every 6 months, I do a 2-week capsule base. I basically take the fungi, the psilocybin, make 0.2 gram capsules, take that for 2 weeks each day. Usually at the end of the days, I try and journal or just write down something of how my day went or things I noticed to kind of help with the processing and the internalizing. So I'm getting those ideas out, even if I'm not speaking to someone out loud, just putting it down somewhere, I feel like has helped me quite a bit as far as getting those benefits.
Awesome. And so you do that every 2 weeks, for 2 weeks every 6 months. Was that just a epiphany that you were like, this really helps? I don't have to do it all the time, but I've got this is the time I do it, and that kind of keeps you in a space where you're still growing and learning, but it's your beneficial cycle. That's what you've kind of discovered.
Yeah, and before I was just kind of doing it whenever I felt like I really needed it, but I felt like because of how I am and kind of my mentality of like, well, I can take more, I as in like, I can deal with more. I can take on more stress. I can take on more work. I can take on more responsibility. And, I don't need to tend to myself. I need to go help do these other things.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, if I just, every 6 months, this is what I'm doing, then I don't have to think about, well, am I there yet? Because, am I there yet might move. It might, just through the process of life, my tolerance is higher, so I can deal with more and I can take on more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what's best for me. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and then I was going to say, and then the science that I've seen about, psilocybin macro and micro doses, typically they look at kind of how long people feel an effect. And I've looked at the graphs and it seems around 6 months is when it does this dip and kind of evens out. You still feel those benefits, but there is that dip. So I'm just trying to, avoid the dip.
I get that. Yeah. So you, how many cycles would you say? Have you been doing this over 5 years, or you've discovered that every 6 months kind of feels right?
So every 6 months I've been doing for about a year now. Prior to that, like I said, it was I'd done it about 2 years. So altogether, I've been microdosing about 3 years. The last year, I've been kind of setting those 6 month benchmarks. Before that, it was just like I said, kind of when I felt like I really needed to bring that into my life. But I would say that the last year, I've kept that kind of much smoother place in my life where I'm not experiencing those, deep episodes of distress or worry or anxiety. I'm able to stay more functional for much longer, just allowing myself to have time in between.
Okay. And it sounds like journaling is really supportive. Do you have a community of people around you feel like you can share your experiences with? Do you have an integration group? Have you ever worked officially with an integration therapist or something like that?
I've never done anything official. I do have a group of close friends that a couple of them, I actually kind of inducted into psychedelics, was held space for their first experiences. And since then, they've gone on to, one of them has actually been all over the world. He actually just came back from doing a 1 month training with the Shipibo people, learning about the ayahuasca ceremonies and processing and all these kind of things. So, having people that now, before I was kind of introducing to, and now they're the ones with these well springs of knowledge that they're bringing back, and I get to learn from them and hear, about these incredible experiences they have. It's just, it's really awesome and great to hear, people that you care about doing better and taking these medicines and going out and just, also telling the world about. So it's getting out there. It's just the people that have the courage to stand up and say, yeah, this does help.
Yeah, coming out of the psychedelic closet. That's a term that kind of circulated for a few years, back a couple of years ago, because it very much collectively is becoming that, because in the last year or so, year and a half, there's been upwelling of acceptance of research, media, people coming out and talking about it that you wouldn't have known otherwise, and like creating an environment of, actually there is a lot of people working with this. It's very, I don't want to say haphazard, but everybody has their own experiences and they go, well, this helps me. Oh, cool, this helps me. That's kind of why we wanted to do this series, was like, well, what was your experience? How did microdosing, macrodosing support you? Everybody's experimenting because it's not standardized, which is kind of beautiful. And also, we all have different experiences. It is a serotonergic substance. So everybody has a different level of serotonin that they produce daily naturally or utilize each day. So it's going to affect everybody differently. And it's such a fascinating time, because we get an opportunity to kind of grow together in a lot of ways. And it sounds like you've got your community of people that are growing with you. And I know that you've done a lot of different, I watched your talk with Stuart, and that you had a mushroom company for a little while. You've kind of parted ways with them, I think, or please share. But what's next for you in your healing, and what you want to do next with psychedelics?
So I actually, after I came home, I started attending college. I got an associate's degree from Mesa Community College, went on to ASU, where I got my degree in business and communications. Mainly because I jumped around probably a good 12 different majors while I was going to college. Not quite. My sister always said that I took the Tommy Boy route. It took 8 years to get a 4-year degree. I just called it a well-rounded education. So a friend of mine who was one of the people who had helped first introduce me to psychedelics had been growing mushrooms as a hobby for probably 5 or 6 years, and he wanted to get into growing medicinal and gourmet mushrooms. Mm-hmm. So I had already had my own experience and was very on board, but didn't know much about the market or kind of what was already out there. So I took the time to do some market research and found that there are not a lot of mushroom producers. But the reason for that is it is a high science. It's not like, regular agriculture where, you plant a seed in the ground, make sure you have good soil, water, sunlight, and you're going to be all right. There's many different steps that require sophisticated processes, sophisticated equipment, sophisticated knowledge, especially if you're going from spores all the way to fruited mushrooms. And that's what we were doing. So my business partner, he was very much the high science side, and I was very much the business side, which was a good partnership. So it worked well that, he was handling the cultivation and I was learning a lot from him. And then I was handling the business side and he was learning a lot from me. But it came to the point where I had moved from living in the Phoenix metro area because we were sort of operating in the Scottsdale area, selling to restaurants, farmers markets. And then I moved to Superior, my hometown, which is about an hour away. So the commute I did for a while, but it was just getting to be too much. So we parted ways. I continued growing mushrooms here in Superior. We have a local farmers market that I was producing for a while. But then I had the opportunity to get into teaching here at I started out substitute teaching part-time. I enjoyed it. And then they offered me a position as the junior high science teacher, which I was really excited about. I was able to do that for a year. And then I purchased a home here, which Superior is a beautiful historic town like Jerome or Bisbee, a lot of history. But our housing stock is very old. The house that I bought was built in the original section that was actually, they got a license to make an addition was in 1912. So the original house, the original house was there before that. And then the first edition that was sort of put on the books on that property was 1912. So there's been a lot of work I've had to do, so I took time off from teaching to focus on working on the house. And then that was when coronavirus hit. I've got three small daughters that live here in Superior with me. And I just took that as a sign that I needed to be present for them and there for them and support their education. So I was working a little bit on the house, but I was focusing much more on their development, and we're making sure they didn't kind of fall behind. And, based on the testing, the tests, the standardized tests we've got back so far, they've actually moved forward. So I was really happy and really excited that, I could be there for them during that time.
Oh, that's amazing. Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So right now, I do plan on my business partner still operating, still doing his thing. I think he's kind of transitioned between Arizona and Florida, trying to have different operations going on. But I do plan on continuing to cultivate, especially for my local farmers market here. They were always super supportive. I actually got more into agriculture when I got here. I actually went through the U of A extension office and got a certification in organic farming. So I was producing for, plants, fruits, vegetables, stuff for the farmers market. So I still want to be a part of that. But I feel more than that, like I've been called to help people. I serve on the board for 3 nonprofits, each one kind of focusing on different parts of community and economic development and veterans sort of issues. I'm the commander for my local American Legion. I'm the junior vice commander for my local Veterans of Foreign Wars post. I am the vice president for Rebuild Superior, which is an economic development nonprofit. Our focuses are blight mitigation, historic housing preservation, and then economic development. Then I'm also on the board for Regenerating Sonora, which is a community-based nonprofit that so far we've been focusing on food sovereignty, food security locally here in Superior, because we were identified as what they call the food desert. Basically, there's very little food being produced, little access to fresh fruits, vegetables. So I've worked in having my own business and focusing on making money, which I know I can do, but I didn't feel as though that's where I was happy. So currently trying to find the balance between affecting the most good, but still making sure that I can provide and give my daughters the life they deserve.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Could you even have pictured those, like, when you first started the Army to where you are today? Like that process, that journey is it sounds like it was so many different things that you've already experienced, and you're only 38, so you've got so much more to experience.
Oh yeah, it's exhausting.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate your time, Mike. This is really, I think, uh, particularly because of your journey and so many people who, there's veterans that are going to watch this and read what is produced and feel like maybe there's another path forward, because I know a lot of people, obviously they go through the VA because they come out of the Army or armed forces, and we all come with our life experiences, but then to be in a combat environment, what that does to the mind and spirit and body, we aren't always equipped for. And it sounds like you've gained a lot of knowledge, and I'd love to follow up maybe next year and find out, what your experiences have been since, and just kind of see, how psychedelics have supported you, how just creating community supports you, because that's kind of what, a big part of the exciting time right now is, like, people are starting to come together and share what their individual quiet experiences are in psychedelia, and it's wonderful to connect and talk about this stuff. It's necessary.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. And like I said, I feel like this, I'm called to stand up and say, like, okay, I can't tell you this is going to work for you. I can't tell you, like, you're going to feel the same things I felt or have the same experience I did, but just let me tell you my story. And I feel like that's like the most powerful thing we can do is just share our stories. And I think it's incredible that a lot of the work that sounds like you've been involved with and are still sounds like very involved with. So if you ever, have updates or if you have a blog or something, feel free to send that over so I can keep up on, like, the stuff you're doing out there in California, because I always love being inspired by, things other people are doing.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually in Florida now. Right
Yeah,
now.
I was looking at the background. I was like, that looks like California.
Well, they're very similar. Lots of palm trees in California and Florida. But yes, absolutely, I will. And thank you so much. And yeah, I will. I'll be in touch for sure. And if there's a way for people to be in touch with you, would you like to share that for veterans or just people that are interested to know about what your experiences are?
Yeah, my email is gmmontiel83@gmail.com. I'm also pretty easy to find on Facebook. I'm pretty active on there. Gary Michael Montiel. I'm always open to connect. Especially with veterans or people. Trying to help veterans, sharing my story, sharing my knowledge of what I know about who I know, and if I can make any connections or be of any help, I'll always do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.